The rain bled neon across Koreatown streets, and Sarah Chun was already 3 steps past him when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the symphony of car horns and karaoke spilling from basement bars. A child crying. Not the bratty wail of a tired toddler, but something raw. Terrified, she stopped, her exhausted body protesting after a double shift, and turned. The boy couldn't have been older than 6. Standing frozen on the corner in a navy designer suit that screamed money. His hands pressed tight over his ears. His whole body rocking as tears carved paths down his face. The crowd, dozens of people, flowed around him like water around a stone, eyes sliding past, as if a traumatized child was just another Tuesday night inconvenience in Manhattan. New York at its finest. See something, ignore something, keep walking. But Sarah had never been good at minding her own business. Hey, sweetie. She knelt a respectful distance away, careful not to crowd him, her voice soft. Are you lost? The boy didn't respond. His eyes stayed squeezed shut, his small chest heaving with each shuddering breath. She tried Chinese next. She'd picked up enough working in Koreatown to manage basic phrases, but got nothing. His rocking intensified, his distress climbing like a siren. Then Sarah noticed it. The label inside his collar visible when his jacket shifted. Kingyu, Korean characters. Her mind flickered back. Seoul, the special needs school where she'd volunteered. The late night studying Hangul by the light of convenience store signs. The way certain sounds, certain rhythms could cut through the noise of panic. She switched languages. Her voice dropping into the gentle melodic cadence she'd learned worked best with overwhelmed children. Quintana Ando. It's okay. You're safe. The boy's eyes snapped open. Sumaja Chanchani. Let's breathe slowly. Sarah demonstrated her hands moving in the calming pattern she'd practiced 100 times in another life. Narangadi Hana T set together with me. She watched his small chest stutter, then sink with hers. His hands slowly lowered from his ears. The terror in his dark eyes shifted. Not gone, but less. Do Hyuno, he whispered, his voice barely cutting through the rain. I'm Do Hyun. Anyang Juna. Sarah felt something loosen in her own chest. Nan and Sarah yo. Hello, Do Hyun. I'm Sarah. She didn't see the black SUVs until they were already there. Didn't notice the men in tailored suits moving through the crowd with military precision until a shadow fell across them both. A presence so heavy it made the air feel thick. Sarah looked up. The man standing above them seemed to pull darkness around him like a cloak. Sharp, brutal features, ink crawling up his neck from beneath an expensive collar. And eyes. God, those eyes that assessed her with the cold calculation of someone who made life or death decisions before most people had their morning coffee. Behind him, for more men formed a wall of expensive fabric and barely concealed violence. A woman's voice cracked through the tension. Frantic, desperate, she pushed through the wall of security, tears streaming down her face. But Do Hyun didn't run to her. He looked at Sarah, uncertainty flickering in his small face. Sarah asked gently, Is that your aunt? Do Hyun nodded, and only then did he move, though he glanced back at Sarah twice as the woman, his aunt, gathered him into her arms. The man with the dangerous eyes hadn't moved. He studied Sarah with an intensity that made her skin prickle, his gaze cataloging everything from her worn sneakers to the name tag she'd forgotten to remove from her stained uniform. The silence stretched. Rain drummed against expensive car roofs. You speak Korean. His voice was smoke over gravel, his English perfect but accented. Where did you learn? Sarah stood slowly, suddenly aware she was surrounded, but refusing to show the fear threading through her veins. I taught English there for a year. Something shifted in his expression. Not softness, never softness, but a recalibration. He glanced at Do Hyun, who was still watching Sarah even as his aunt held him. Then back at her, Park Jahun. He didn't offer his hand. It was a statement, not an introduction. He expected her to know the name. She didn't. But she nodded anyway. You calmed him. Not a question. There was something beneath the words. Disbelief, maybe. Wonder even. No one outside family has been able to do that since. He cut himself off, his jaw tightening. Then, what's your name? Sarah. Chun. Jahun pulled out his phone, typed something with quick, precise movements, then looked at one of his men. His voice dropped, but she heard it clearly. A command that made her blood run cold. Find everything about her. Where she lives, where she works, who she knows, everything. His eyes returned to Sarah, and for the first time since she'd knelt beside that crying child, she felt genuine bone-deep fear. "We'll be in touch, Miss Chin." Then they were gone, disappearing into the rain-soaked night as quickly as they'd materialized, leaving Sarah standing alone on the corner, her heart hammering against her ribs. She stood there for a long moment, rain soaking through her jacket. What the hell did I just walk into? Sarah made it back to her studio apartment in Queens on autopilot, her mind replaying the encounter on an endless loop. Those eyes, that command, find everything about her. She should have felt good about helping a lost child. She should have gone to bed satisfied that she'd done the right thing. Instead, she triple-checked her locks and Googled Park Jahan, New York. The results made her stomach drop. Thank you for watching, my loves. If this chapter pulled you into the shadows with me, hit like, subscribe, and tell me your thoughts below. Every comment helps this story reach the people who need it. Rest your heart for now because the next part goes even deeper. And trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. The address Jahan had sent led to a building in Midtown that looked like it could swallow entire fortunes without a trace. Sarah stood on the sidewalk for 3 full minutes, her reflection warping in the gleaming glass facade before she forced herself through the revolving doors. The lobby was all marble and cold light. A security guard with an earpiece waved her toward a private elevator without asking her name. They already knew she was coming. The ride to the top floor felt like ascending into thinner air. Her ears popped, her pulse hammered against her throat. When the doors opened, she stepped into a penthouse office where the city noise had been surgically removed, replaced by a silence so complete it felt oppressive, engineered, controlled. The space was vast and minimalist. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Manhattan that made her feel small, insignificant. And there, silhouetted against all that gray light, stood Park Jahan behind a desk the size of her entire apartment. He didn't stand, didn't acknowledge her entrance, just watched her walk toward him across what felt like a mile of polished concrete floor, her worn sneakers squeaking softly with each step. Sarah's mouth was dry. She could feel his eyes tracking her movement, cataloging every nervous gesture, every tell. She stopped a few feet from the desk, close enough to see the manila folder sitting in its center, far enough to maintain some illusion of safety. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. She sat. Jahan leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. The light behind him made it impossible to read his expression. Do-hyun's mother was my sister. 2 years ago, she was murdered in front of him. A bullet meant for me found her instead. The words were clinical, sharp, stripped of everything human. He was 4 years old. He watched her die. Jahan's tone didn't waver. Before that night, he was verbal, social, a bright, happy child who loved to paint and ask questions about everything. After a pause, the first crack in his composure, he stopped speaking to anyone outside immediate family. His therapists call it selective mutism triggered by severe trauma. He has sensory sensitivities, panic attacks, night terrors. He trusts no one. Sarah's chest ached. She thought of that little boy rocking on the corner, hands over his ears, drowning in a sea of indifferent strangers. Until you, Jahan's eyes fixed on her now, sharp and assessing. You spoke to him for 3 minutes, and he responded. He laughed. He took your hand. That hasn't happened in 2 years, Miss Chun. He reached forward and opened the folder. Sarah's stomach dropped. It was her life. Dissected, laid bare. Her undergraduate transcript from Portland State. Her teaching certification from the Seoul program. Copies of her apartment lease, her credit card statements, her mother's death certificate, her student loan balance, $62,000, highlighted in yellow, her mother's medical debt that she'd inherited, $34,000, circled in red. You worked 2 jobs to put yourself through college. Jahan's voice was neutral, reciting facts. You majored in linguistics with a focus on Korean language and culture. After graduation, you taught English in Seoul for 14 months and volunteered at a special needs school on weekends. You returned to New York when your mother was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She died 6 months later. You've been working double shifts at a Korean fusion restaurant in Koreatown for the past year, barely making rent. Each word was a violation, a scalpel cutting into her privacy. Sarah's hands clenched in her lap. Her face felt hot. You had no right. I have every right. He closed the folder. The moment you touched my nephew, You became a person of interest. I protect what's mine, Miss Chun. That requires information. I'm not yours. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, perhaps. Or recognition of a challenge. Not yet. He slid a document across the desk. I'm offering you a position as Do Hyen's private caregiver and cultural educator. $30,000 per month, health insurance included, all taxes paid, completely legal employment. Sarah stared at the contract. The numbers didn't make sense. More money than she'd ever imagined having. A way out of debt, out of desperation. But nothing came free. What's the catch? No catch. You live in the house. You're available when he needs you. You help him heal. You keep him safe. Your debt disappears. Your life becomes simple. His voice stayed level. You become mine. The words hung in the air between them. Not employed by him. His. Possession, not partnership. I need time to think. You have 1 hour. He turned his chair to face the windows. The meeting is over, Miss Chun. When you're ready to accept, the car is waiting downstairs. Sarah walked out on unsteady legs. The elevator ride down felt like falling. In the lobby, she found a bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. Looked at herself in the mirror. Saw a woman backed into a corner. Saw someone who was tired of being afraid. When she came back up, Jehun was exactly where she'd left him. She sat down without being invited. I have conditions. He turned to face her, and for the first time, his expression was almost amused. Of course you do. I want to see his medical records. I want to speak to his current therapists. I want to understand what I'm walking into before I commit to helping him. Agreed. And I want your word that if this doesn't work, if I can't help him, you'll let me go. No retaliation, no consequences. Just let me walk away. His smile was sharp. You'll help him. How can you be so sure? Because you already have. He gestured to the window. 3 blocks from here is a coffee shop. Do Hyen is there with his aunt right now. He asked for you by name. He asked when the lady who speaks Korean will come back. For the first time in 2 years, he's asking for someone outside the family. Sarah's heart clenched. That changed things. Changed everything. All right. She stood up, smoothing her hands down her slacks. When do I start? Now. He pressed a button on his desk. The elevator opened, and a man stepped out. This is Marcus. He'll take you home to pack. You'll be staying with us tonight. Marcus was younger than she'd expected. Clean cut, professional, the kind of competent efficiency that spoke of military training. He nodded at her respectfully. Ma'am, ready when you are. Sarah looked back at Jehun. Am I making a mistake? His answer was immediate. Yes, but you're making it anyway. The drive to Queens gave her time to think. To panic. To wonder if she'd just signed away her life to the devil himself. Marcus didn't try to make conversation. He drove with the same professional competence he wore like armor. At her apartment building, he waited by the car while she went upstairs. Her studio looked smaller than usual. Shabbier. A life she'd outgrown without realizing it. She packed quickly. Clothes, books, her laptop, the few photos she had of her mother. The Korean language workbooks she'd saved from her teaching days. When she came back down, Marcus was leaning against the car, scanning the street with practiced eyes. He took her suitcase without comment. The drive back into Manhattan felt different. Like crossing a bridge she couldn't uncross. Like stepping through a door that only opened one way. The townhouse was in the Upper East Side. Old money elegant, with black wrought iron and limestone steps that gleamed in the afternoon light. Not a penthouse this time. A home. Marcus carried her bag up the steps. The door opened before they reached it. An older Korean woman stood there, her smile warm but assessing. She spoke in rapid Korean to Marcus, who responded with obvious respect. Then she turned to Sarah. You must be Miss Chun. I'm Mrs. Nam. I manage the household. Do Hyen is waiting for you. She led Sarah through a foyer that felt like stepping into another world. Rich wood paneling, fresh flowers, the kind of quiet that money bought. But underneath it all, Sarah could sense the presence of security. Men positioned strategically, radios crackling softly, the particular tension of a place under protection. Mrs. Nam showed her to a room on the 2nd floor. Large windows, comfortable furniture, a private bathroom. Your things are being unpacked. Dinner is at 6. Do Hyen likes routine, but he's been unsettled today. Excited, maybe. It's been a long time since he's been excited about anything. Sarah set down her purse. Where is he now? Downstairs in the den. He spends most of his time there, or in the sensory room. Jehun's voice carefully neutral. We've tried everything. Therapists, specialists. He tolerates them but doesn't respond. Sarah studied the room. The bed was made military tight. The toys were organized by size and color. Everything was perfect. Sterile. Where is he now? Downstairs in the den. His expression flickered. Worry maybe. Or resignation. He's been anxious since Jehun told him you were coming. He remembers you. Something warm and painful bloomed in Sarah's chest. They found him in a room off the kitchen, sitting on the floor with a pile of wooden blocks untouched beside him. He was rocking slightly, his hands pressed together, his dark eyes fixed on nothing. Sarah knelt a few feet away. Hello, Do-hyun. His rocking stopped. His eyes found hers. Nakiak, do you remember me? She kept her voice soft, musical. Podar, the rainy day? A flicker of recognition, his hands unclenched. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out the drawing she'd made. Stick figures of a woman and a boy, breathing together, numbered 1, 2, 3 in Korean. She'd drawn it on her lunch break using crayons she'd bought at a drugstore. Do-hyun stared at it. Then slowly, he reached out. His small fingers touched the paper, tracing the figures. That's us, Sarah said in Korean. Breathing together. You were very brave. I was scared of the rain. His voice was a whisper, rusty with disuse. I know rain can be scary when you're alone. But you're not alone now. She heard a sharp intake of breath. Minji stood in the doorway, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears gleamed in her eyes. Sarah's own breath caught. She hadn't made him speak. She'd just given him a reason to want to. The following weeks fell into a rhythm. Sarah arrived each afternoon, and she and Do-hyun created their own world on the floor of that den. Picture cards, sensory bottles filled with glitter and oil, simple songs in Korean. She learned his triggers. Sudden sounds, unexpected touch, transitions without warning. She learned what soothed him. Deep pressure, repetitive motions, the sound of her voice speaking his mother's language. She learned that he loved the color blue, that he hummed when he felt safe, that his smile, when it finally broke through, was like sunlight after a storm. Nabi, butterfly. He pointed at the picture card, his pronunciation careful. Maya Nabi, that's right, butterfly. Sarah clapped softly. Do-hyun is smart. His smile widened. Then he laughed. A small rusty sound that cut through the afternoon silence like a bell. Minji, passing by the doorway, stopped so abruptly she nearly stumbled. Her hand went to her mouth again, and Sarah saw tears streaming down her face. That sound, that laugh. It was the sound of life returning to a tomb. Jehun observed from doorways. Sarah felt his presence before she saw him. That particular quality of silence that followed him like a shadow. He never interrupted, never spoke, just watched. She took a step closer, closing the distance between them, her chin tilted up in defiance. So, yes, I'm staying, but don't mistake that for acceptance. I'll call you out when you're wrong. I'll fight you when you try to control too much, and I won't pretend that what you do is justifiable just because I care about your family. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then his hand finally touched her face, his palm cupping her jaw, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, he said quietly, or the most foolish, maybe both. His lips found hers, and this kiss was different from the first. Slower, deeper, weighted with the knowledge of what she was choosing, what she was accepting. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah's heart was still racing. But the terror had transformed into something else, something darker and more complicated. She'd chosen the cage, and the monster inside it, and God help her. She wasn't sure she'd ever want to leave. The world outside the townhouse had shifted. Sarah felt it the moment she stepped onto the street. That prickle of awareness, the sense of being watched. The gilded cage she'd chosen had become a shield, and leaving it meant exposing herself to predators she was only beginning to understand. Marcus drove her everywhere now, to the small Korean market 3 blocks away, where she bought ingredients for Do-hyun's favorite snacks. To the library, where she checked out picture books in Hangul. Even the short walk from the car to the entrance felt orchestrated, controlled. Is this really necessary? She asked him one afternoon, watching him scan the street before opening her door. His expression was kind but immovable. Park doesn't take chances with what matters to him. The words settled in her chest, warm and terrifying. She'd become visible. Jehun's woman, though they'd never discussed labels or definitions. In his world, the kiss had been a declaration, the choice to stay, a vow, and now she wore that visibility like a target. The first real threat came on a Tuesday afternoon at the grocery store. Sarah was in the produce section selecting apples for Do-hyun. He'd eat them if she cut them into precise ikes. No skin when she felt it. That particular quality of attention that made her skin crawl. A man stood too close. Mid-40s expensive suit, smile that didn't reach his eyes. He picked up a melon, examining it with theatrical care while his gaze slid over her like oil. Beautiful day, he said in accented English. Mandarin, she thought. Or Cantonese. Sarah shifted away, her hand tightening on the shopping basket. Excuse me, you're Sarah Chun. His smile widened, showing too many teeth. You work for Park Jae-hyun, taking care of his nephew. Her blood iced. Marcus was 2 aisles over, checking the perimeter. She could scream, run, but her body had locked into place. I don't know what you're talking about. Do-hyun is a beautiful child. Watch Do-hyun paint with traditional brushes, giggling when the ink splattered. Listen to Minji tell stories about their grandmother, her voice warm with memory. Then everything shattered. They were heading back to the car. Do-hyun chattering happily in Korean when Sarah caught the wrongness. A black sedan idling across the street, engine running. 2 men in the museum entrance who'd been watching them too closely. Marcus sensed it a heartbeat later. Get in the car now. The crack of gunfire was a physical punch to Sarah's chest. Time fractured into brutal, crystalline moments. Marcus shoving her and Do-hyun behind the SUV. Minji screaming. The acrid smell of cordite and burning rubber. The sound of bullets punching through metal. Marcus returned fire. His movements efficient and deadly. The younger guards flanked them, weapons drawn, shouting into their radios. More shots. The sedan's windshield exploding. A man dropping to the pavement. Do-hyun was pressed against Sarah's chest. His hands over his ears, his whole body shaking. She covered him with her body, her own terror, a living thing clawing at her throat. Then Marcus had them moving, hustling them into the SUV as tires squealed and more gunfire erupted. The vehicle lurched forward, and Sarah caught a glimpse through the rear window. 2 bodies on the pavement, Marcus's jaw set in grim satisfaction, the museum entrance now a war zone. They drove in silence. Do-hyun had gone completely nonverbal, rocking in Sarah's arms. Minji was pale as death, tears streaming down her face. Marcus spoke into his phone in low, urgent Korean. We're 3 minutes out. Secure the perimeter. Get Mr. Park on the line. The townhouse had transformed into a fortress. Men in suits lined the street, weapons visible. Every entrance was guarded. Jae-hyun stood in the foyer like a statue carved from rage. His phone pressed to his ear, his voice dropping commands like guillotine blades. When he saw them, his control cracked. He ended the call and crossed the space in 3 strides. His hands framing Sarah's face, his eyes wild. Are you hurt? No, we're okay. But Do-hyun wasn't okay. He'd retreated into himself, nonverbal and trembling. Jae-hyun scooped him up, carrying him upstairs while murmuring soft reassurances in Korean. Sarah sank onto the couch, her legs finally giving out. Marcus stood at attention, his face professionally blank despite the blood spattered on his shirt. Not his, she realized. Someone else's. They knew the route, Marcus said quietly when Jae-hyun returned. They knew exactly where we'd be and when. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jae-hyun's eyes skinned the room, calculating. Sweep the house. Every phone, every device, check everyone. His gaze landed on each person present, including Minji. Minji, you can't think. Her voice broke. I don't know what to think. But someone told the Jade Phoenix exactly where my family would be today. The temperature in the room dropped to Arctic, and I will find out who. The search took hours. Men systematically dismantled electronics, checked cars, interrogated staff. Mrs. Nam submitted to questioning with quiet dignity. The guards were cleared one by one. Sarah sat with Do-hyun, holding him as he rocked, singing soft Korean lullabies until his breathing finally evened. When she emerged, the sun was setting and the house felt like a tomb. She found Minji in the kitchen alone, her face streaked with tears. The younger woman looked up when Sarah entered, and the guilt in her eyes was devastating. It was you. Sarah's voice came out hollow. Minji crumpled. I didn't. They said they just wanted to scare you off. That's all. Just frighten you enough to leave. The words tumbled out in a desperate rush. Korean and English mixing. I thought you were a distraction. Someone who'd get hurt or get him hurt. I thought I was protecting my family. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. You made a deal with the people who want him dead. They promised no one would get hurt. They said they'd stage something minor, and you'd leave, and everything would go back to normal. Minji's sobs were breaking raw, but then they tried to kill him. They used me to try to kill my brother. The betrayal was internal, intimate, not an enemy from outside, but family from within. Jahun stood in the doorway. Sarah didn't know how long he'd been there, but the look on his face made her heart stop. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and grabbed Minji by the shoulders. For a terrible moment, Sarah thought he might hurt her. Instead, he just stared at his sister like she was a stranger. Get out. His voice was dead, empty. Pack your things. You have 1 hour. If you're still here after that, I'll have you removed. Jahun, please. You put a target on Sarah, on Do-hyun, on me. You made a deal with the same kind of people who got our sister killed. Each word fell like a stone. You're not my family anymore. Minji collapsed, her sobs echoing through the house. Jahun turned and walked away, his footsteps disappearing down the hall. Sarah stood frozen, torn between following him and staying with this broken woman who'd betrayed them all. In the end, she followed him. She found him in his study, standing at the window, his hands braced against the frame. His shoulders were rigid, his breathing controlled but audible. Sarah, she was all I had left. His voice cracked. Instead, she rose and padded downstairs in bare feet. The house was empty except for 2 guards stationed outside. Mrs. Nam had gone to her sister's for the night. Do-hyun was upstairs, finally sleeping after hours of Sarah holding him, singing, promising safety she couldn't guarantee. Sarah found herself in Marcus's security office. She didn't know what she was looking for. Comfort, maybe. Evidence that everything was under control. She found something else. It was tucked behind his desk, partially hidden by a loose baseboard. Small, black, high-tech. She recognized it from cop shows, from movies, a listening device, an FBI transmitter, if the tiny embossed letters were accurate. Sarah's hands shook as she held it. Marcus, the loyal one, the man who'd protected her, who'd saved them at the museum. He was a spy. How long? How much had he heard? How much had he reported? Her mind spun with implications. Marcus had been there for everything. Every conversation, every confession, every moment Jahun had let his guard down. She could turn it in, tell Jahun. Watch as his trusted lieutenant was torn apart, or her fingers tightened on the cold metal. This was her escape, her exit. She could take this device, walk out the door, find the nearest FBI field office, trade everything she knew for immunity, for safety, let the good guys take down the monster, go back to her normal life, her safe life, the life where she wasn't washing blood from a killer's hands. Jahun's words echoed in her mind. She could leave. This was the sign, the universe offering her an out. Sarah stood there for an eternity, the device growing warm in her palm. She thought of Jahun's kiss, tasting of whiskey and desperation. She thought of his sister's unfinished canvas. She thought of Do-hyun calling her Nuna and Yama with trust in his voice. She thought of Minji's betrayal, of the devastation on Jahun's face when his sister shattered his world. She thought of the Jade Phoenix threatening a 5-year-old child. She thought of moral lines and impossible choices, and the fact that she'd stopped recognizing herself months ago. Her breath shuddered. Then she dropped the device on the floor. The small crunch of metal and circuits beneath her heel was the loudest sound she'd ever heard. The moral line wasn't just crossed. It was obliterated. She'd just destroyed federal evidence. She'd just become complicit in obstruction of justice. She'd just chosen the monster over the light. Sarah ground the device into electronic dust, then swept the pieces into the trash, covered them with paper towels, carried the whole bag outside to the bins. When she came back inside, her hands were steady. The choice was made. She was his now completely. No escape, no redemption, just this dark, impossible love and the family she'd chosen to protect. Dawn came soft and gray. Sarah was in the kitchen making coffee she didn't want. When she heard the vehicle's return, she knew before she saw him. Monitored visits, conditions, something that gives him stability but lets me. He swallowed hard. Lets me know my son. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't victory. It was the razor's edge between 2 impossible choices. Jahun's voice was cold steel. You will never take him from this house. You will never be alone with him. And if you ever put him at risk again, I will end you. Badge or not. Lee Sang was jaw tightened, but he nodded. Agreed. The guards lowered their weapons. The officer holstered her gun, but didn't relax. Do-hyun looked up at Sarah, his eyes huge and frightened. Do I have to go? No, baby. She pulled him into her arms, her voice breaking finally. You never have to go. This is your home forever. His arms wrapped around her neck, and he pressed his face into her shoulder, his small body shaking with relief. Jehun's hands settled on both of them, heavy and possessive and protective. His eyes met Lee Sang was across the garden, and the message was clear. This is my family. Challenge that again, and law won't save you. The wedding was over. The celebration had died. But Sarah stood there in her midnight blue hanbok, holding the child who called her mother, feeling her husband's hand steady against her back, and knew one absolute truth. Their war wasn't over, but they would fight it together. The man, the monster, the woman who'd chosen darkness, and the child, they'd all die to protect forever. If this story pulled you into the shadows with me, hit like, subscribe, and tell me your thoughts below. Rest your heart for now because the next story goes even deeper. And trust me, you won't want to miss what comes. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the bathroom of the townhouse, staring at the plastic test in her trembling hands. 2 pink lines. Pregnant. The word echoed in her mind like a gunshot in an empty cathedral. She'd suspected for weeks, but had pushed the thought away, buried it beneath Do-hyun's therapy sessions and the careful routine they'd built. Now reality stared back at her in clinical certainty. The door opened behind her. She'd forgotten to lock it, forgotten that privacy was a luxury she'd surrendered when she chose this life. Jehun stood in the doorway, his eyes immediately finding the test in her hands. His face went through a series of expressions. Surprise, calculation, something that might have been wonder, then steel. How long have you known? His voice was carefully controlled. I just found out. Sarah set the test on the marble counter with hands that shook despite her efforts. We need to talk. Yes, we do. He stepped into the bathroom and closed the door behind him, the click of the lock unnaturally loud. Are you okay? Are you hurt? Do you need a doctor? The questions came rapid fire, his mind already shifting into protection mode. Sarah almost smiled despite everything. Even now, even with this bombshell, his first instinct was her safety. I'm fine. Scared, but fine. She leaned back against the sink. What does this mean for us? For Do-hyun. For everything. It means everything changes. He moved closer, his hands finding her face with that devastating gentleness she'd come to crave. It means we're having a baby, and anyone who threatens our family dies. The casual way he said it, the matter-of-fact delivery of a death sentence, should have terrified her. Instead, Sarah felt something settle in her chest. Certainty maybe, or acceptance of what they'd both become. They told Do-hyun over breakfast. He looked up from his carefully arranged triangle of toast, Korean jam spread in precise lines, and blinked at them with those dark eyes that saw too much. A baby. His voice was thoughtful, careful. Like me. Like you, Sarah confirmed. But this baby will be born here, safe, with us. You'll be the best big brother. Do-hyun considered this with the seriousness of a child who'd been forced to grow up too fast. Will I have to share you? Never. Sarah reached across the table and took his small hand. You're my first baby. That never changes. His smile, when it came, was like sunrise after the longest night. Can I help name the baby? Of course you can. That afternoon, while Do-hyun napped and the security detail made their rounds, Sarah found herself in Jehun's study. He was on the phone, speaking in rapid Korean, his voice sharp with command. She caught fragments. Black Serpent. Territory. Response. When he saw her, he ended the call immediately. Problems. She settled into the chair across from his desk, noting the way his eyes tracked her movement, cataloging any sign of discomfort or distress. Nothing I can't handle. He set the phone aside. How are you feeling? Do you need anything? I need to know what kind of world we're bringing this child into. The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Jehun was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled, his expression thoughtful. The same world Do-hyun lives in. Protected. Loved. Safe because I make it safe. And if something happens to you, it won't. His voice was steel. But if it does, Sarah leaned forward. I need to know there's a plan. That our children will be protected even if. She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't voice the possibility of losing him. If something happens to me, there are contingencies. Safe houses. Money and accounts that can't be touched. People who owe me favors that extend to my family. His eyes met hers. You and our children will never want for anything. Never be unprotected. It should have been comforting. Instead, it reminded her of the precarious nature of their existence, the constant shadow of violence that followed them. I want to learn to shoot. The words came out before she'd fully formed the thought. Jehun's eyebrows rose. Sarah, I'm serious. If I'm going to be in this world, if our children are going to be in this world, I need to know how to protect them. He studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly he nodded. Marcus will teach you. Starting tomorrow. The shooting range was in the basement of a building Jehun owned in Queens. Industrial, anonymous, the kind of place that asked no questions. Marcus waited for her with a selection of handguns laid out on a metal table like surgical instruments. We'll start with the basics. His voice was professional, the same tone he used for security briefings. Grip, stance, sight alignment. Most people never fire a gun in anger. You're not most people. Sarah picked up the smallest pistol, surprised by its weight. Cold metal and lethal possibility. How many people have you killed? That's not a question you ask. Marcus's expression didn't change. What you need to know is that when the moment comes, you don't hesitate. Hesitation gets you killed. Gets your family killed. He spent 2 hours teaching her the fundamentals. How to load, how to aim, how to breathe through the recoil. Her hands shook the first few times, but by the end of the session, she was hitting the target consistently. You're a natural. Marcus collected the empty casings with efficient movements. Most people fight their instincts. You embrace them. I don't know what that says about me. It says you're a survivor. It says you'll do whatever it takes to protect what matters. That night, Sarah lay in bed next to Jehun, her hands resting on her still flat stomach. He was asleep, but she could feel the tension in his body even in unconsciousness. The weight of command, of constant vigilance. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. We have Mrs. Nam. You have 24 hours to bring us Park Jehun or she dies. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She shook Jehun awake, showed him the message. His face went from sleepy to lethal in the span of a heartbeat. Black Serpent. His voice was death itself. They took her when she went to visit her sister. He was already moving, pulling on clothes, reaching for the phone. Within minutes, the house was alive with activity. Men with guns, radios crackling, vehicles starting in the courtyard. You stay here. Jehun checked his weapon with practiced efficiency. You and Do-hyun stay locked in the safe room until I get back. No. Sarah stood, her mind made up. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You're pregnant. You're not trained for this. Mrs. Nam is family. She's taken care of Do-hyun, taken care of all of us. I'm not hiding while she's in danger. Sarah. His voice was pleading now, desperate. I can't lose you. I can't lose the baby. Then don't. Sarah moved to the gun safe, inputted the code he'd taught her, withdrew the compact pistol Marcus had recommended. Come back with Mrs. Nam. Come back to us. The warehouse district at midnight was a maze of shadows and industrial decay. Jehun's convoy moved through the darkness like predators, silent and deadly. Sarah rode in the lead vehicle, her heart hammering against her ribs, the weight of the gun unfamiliar at her hip. They have 12 men inside. Marcus spoke into his radio, his voice crackling through static. Mrs. Nam is being held on the second floor, northeast corner. Thermal imaging confirmed it. Heat signatures moving through the building, one isolated figure that had to be their target. This is a trap. One of Jehun's lieutenants, a scarred man named Song, voiced what they all knew. They want you to come in angry, make mistakes. Of course it's a trap. Jehun's smile was sharp as a blade. That's why we're going to spring it on our terms. The assault was swift and brutal. Jehun's men moved like clockwork, each knowing their role, their target, their exit strategy. Sarah stayed with the vehicle as instructed, watching through night vision scopes as muzzle flashes lit up the warehouse windows. But when she saw the figure moving around the building's perimeter, heading for an unguarded entrance, she made a choice that would haunt her forever. Sarah slipped from the vehicle and followed. The back entrance was unlocked, just as she'd suspected. The Black Serpent had left it open, counting on Jehun's tunnel vision, his focus on the obvious entrance. They expected him to charge through the front while they escaped through the back with Mrs. Nom. Sarah climbed the metal stairs, her footsteps silent on the industrial grating. She could hear voices above, rough Korean she couldn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable. Urgency. Fear. She reached the second floor and saw them. 3 men escorting Mrs. Nom toward the rear stairwell, the older woman's hands zip-tied, her face bruised but defiant. One of the men had a gun pressed to her temple. Sarah raised her weapon, hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Marcus's training kicked in. Breathe. Sight alignment. Don't hesitate. Let her go. Her voice cut through the corridor, sharp and clear. The men spun, weapons rising. In that moment of confusion, Mrs. Nom drove her elbow into her captor's ribs, dropping him to his knees. Sarah fired. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The first man dropped. The second raised his gun, and Sarah fired again. Center mass, just like Marcus had taught her. By the time Jehun reached the second floor, following the sound of gunshots, it was over. Sarah stood in the corridor, smoking gun in her hand, Mrs. Nom safe behind her, 2 dead men at her feet. His face went through a dozen emotions. Relief, terror, pride, fury. You disobeyed orders. His voice was deadly quiet. I saved Mrs. Nom. You could have been killed. You could have lost the baby. But I wasn't. Sarah's hands were steady now, the adrenaline fading into cold certainty. And now they know. Now everyone knows that Park Jehun's family doesn't just hide behind his protection. We fight back. Mrs. Nom looked between them, understanding passing across her weathered features. She'd raised children in this world. She knew what Sarah had just become. The drive back was silent. Mrs. Nom sat in the front passenger seat, accepting medical attention from one of Jehun's men. Sarah sat beside Jehun in the back, their hands intertwined, both lost in their own thoughts. Everything's different now. Sarah's voice was quiet, almost lost in the engine noise. Yes. Jehun's thumb traced over her knuckles. There's no going back. I don't want to go back. At the townhouse, they tucked a sleeping Do-hyun more securely into his bed, checked the locks, set the security protocols. The familiar ritual of a family under siege. In their bedroom, Sarah stood at the window overlooking the garden. The place where they'd been married, where Lee Sang-woo had tried to take Do-hyun, where they'd chosen each other over everything else. I killed 2 people tonight. Her voice was matter-of-fact, clinical. Yes. Jehun moved behind her, his arms encircling her waist, his hands settling protectively over her stomach. I should feel guilty. Should feel something. What do you feel? Sarah considered the question seriously. Protected. Like I can keep our family safe. Jehun's reflection met her eyes in the window glass. That makes you dangerous. More dangerous than any weapon I could give you. Good. Sarah leaned back against his chest. Our children are going to need dangerous parents. The months that followed blurred together in a haze of preparation and growing tension. Sarah's belly rounded as the baby grew, and with each passing week, Jehun became more protective, more paranoid, more deadly to anyone who posed even a theoretical threat. Detective Rivera appeared at their door on a Tuesday morning in her 6th month. FBI credentials, sharp suit, the kind of determined expression that meant trouble. Mrs. Park. Her voice was professionally neutral. I'm investigating the disappearance of Marcus Webb. I believe you knew him as Marcus, your husband's security chief. Sarah's blood chilled, but her expression remained calm. I don't know anyone by that name. Really? Rivera consulted her notes. Because we have surveillance footage of you entering and leaving his apartment building 3 months ago. The night he disappeared. I think there's been a mistake. Sarah's hand rested on her belly, a protective gesture that wasn't entirely feigned. My husband will want to speak to his lawyer about this. Your husband isn't here. Rivera stepped closer, her voice dropping. And we both know Marcus was feeding information to federal law enforcement. What I need to know is whether you killed him or whether Park Jehun did. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Sarah met the detective's eyes steadily, channeling every lesson Jehun had taught her about power, about control. I have no idea what you're talking about. But if you're going to continue harassing a pregnant woman, you'd better have a warrant. Rivera's smile was thin. We'll get one. And when we do, we'll tear this house apart until we find what we're looking for. After the detective left, Sarah called Jehun immediately. He listened to her report in silence, his breathing steady and controlled. She's fishing. His voice was calm, but Sarah could hear the underlying current of violence. If they had real evidence, they wouldn't be questioning you. They'd be kicking down doors. What do? We wait. We prepare. And if Detective Rivera gets too close to the truth, we eliminate the problem. The casual way he said it, the matter-of-fact acceptance of murder as a solution, should have shocked her. Instead, Sarah felt that familiar settling in her chest. The acceptance of what they'd become. That evening, Do-hyun helped her fold baby clothes in the nursery they'd prepared. Soft yellows and greens, gender-neutral colors that would work for either the son or daughter growing inside her. Nuna. His voice was thoughtful as he arranged tiny socks in perfect rows. Will you love the baby more than me? Never. Sarah pulled him into her lap, careful of her rounded belly. You're my first baby. The one who taught me how to be a mother. Nothing will ever change that. Even if I'm not really your baby. The question broke her heart. You are really my baby. Not because we share blood, but because we chose each other. Because I would die to protect you, and you trust me to keep you safe. Do-hyun considered this with his characteristic seriousness. Like Appa chose us. Like we chose him. Exactly like that. That night, as Sarah lay in bed listening to Jaehoon's steady breathing, she felt the baby kick for the first time. A flutter of movement, proof of life, of the future growing inside her. She thought about Detective Rivera, about Marcus's disappearance, about the line she'd crossed the night she destroyed federal evidence. She thought about the men she'd killed, the blood on her hands, the dangerous woman she'd become. And she felt no regret. Only fierce, protective love for the family she'd chosen, the family she'd killed to protect. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, and Sarah smiled in the darkness. Another warrior for their impossible clan, another child who would grow up knowing that love and violence were often the same thing. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos, unaware that in this one house, this one fortress, a family had chosen darkness and found light in each other's eyes. The war wasn't over. It might never be over, but they would fight it together, and that was enough.